A Dark Lord of the Galactic Empire cut open an ancient coffin on a desert moon. He had come looking for a weapon to use against his master. What stepped out was a woman who had been sealed inside it for nearly 4,000 years. Her name was Celeste Mourn. Vader's clone troopers moved to secure her, and within seconds, they were no longer men. Their skin hardened into plates under the armor, and their fingers lengthened into claws. One man's jaw split open around new teeth, and he lunged at the man beside him. The squad became rock ghouls, Sith-spawned mutants, and turned on everything within reach. Caught between his transformed troopers and the Jedi he had just disarmed, Vader retreated. Vader was a Dark Lord of the Sith, carrying out a Sith errand. The artifact he came for had been built by Sith founders, used by Sith Lords, and hunted by every dark side power that had ever known of it. Vader walked away from it. Almost no other Sith Lord in the long history of the Order ever did. Whatever had stopped him was around Mourn's neck, and the metal had a name, the Muur Talisman. It held the spirit of a dead Sith Lord called Celeste Mourn, and it carried a plague that could warp almost any nearby non-force sensitive sentient into a rat ghoul. Mourn had carried it for nearly 40 centuries. In the Legends timeline, an artifact dangerous enough to make a Dark Lord of the Sith retreat was rare, but it was not the only one. Across thousands of years of Sith and Jedi history, only two artifacts stand out as things both sides, working independently and centuries apart, tried to erase completely. Thousands of years earlier, a different weapon had pushed a different Sith Lord to a far more extreme response than retreat. His name was Darth Revan, and the artifact he wanted to destroy was called the Darkstaff. The Sith who made the Darkstaff many millennia earlier tried to destroy it before Revan was ever born. An unnamed Dark Lord, recorded in later archives only as the artifact's maker, finished creating the staff, looked at what he had made, and came to regret his creation. The staff killed him. The staff drained force essence from living beings, possessed the minds of those who held it, animated corpses into dark side using zombies, and twisted living creatures into Sith spawn. Anyone near it felt an uncomfortable pressure on their concentration. After the creator's death, the artifact drifted through the galaxy for ages. At one point, the reconstituted Sith Empire acquired it and carried it to a relic storage station called the Arcanum. The staff was sealed inside a reliquary in the specimen storage wing, with a plaque bolted to the case warning that the artifact must not be touched or interacted with physically or mentally. The vault's plaque was the Sith Empire's own admission that they had built something they cannot safely use. A Sith Lord named Togris, working for a group of renegade Sith called the Dreadmasters, penetrated the Arcanum storage wing and pulled the Darkstaff out of its reliquary. The Dreadmasters were 6 powerful Sith Lords who had served the Sith Emperor for ages before breaking from the Empire. Togris used the staff to interrupt the Sith holocron that was holding a Deshad assassin in stasis nearby. The Deshad slowed his pursuers, while Togris escaped the Arcanum with the Darkstaff. Strike forces from both the Sith Empire and the Galactic Republic pursued Togris. He took the staff to a Dreadguard sanctum on Belsavis and left it with his apprentice, who tried to wield the artifact and was drained dry midway through the battle. The staff vanished from the sanctum in a fiery explosion. Eventually, it ended up on a planet called Obelisk in the Kularan system. The Obli, a species that lived on the planet, began studying the staff. Working through their minds, the staff summoned a shadow creature into the atmosphere of their world and fed them the fear that the creature had come to destroy them. The Obli built a machine to expel the creature and used the Darkstaff as its power source. The staff absorbed the power the Obli channeled into it and used it to destroy Obelisk. What survived of the Obli home world settled into a ring of debris around the nearest star. The Kularan asteroid belt is still drifting in orbit where Obelisk used to be. The Obli were not Sith. The staff destroyed them on the same terms it had destroyed every Sith who had ever touched it. Whoever picked it up was the next casualty, regardless of which side of the Force they served. Years after the world broke apart, a Sith Lord came to the asteroid belt drawn by the staff itself. His name was Darth Revan. Revan was a Zelosian, a plant-based humanoid species that mimicked human appearance closely enough to pass. He took the name Darth Revan from a corrupted Sith manuscript that had garbled the name of Darth Revan, the Dark Lord of the Sith redeemed during the Jedi Civil War, long before Revan's own era. He carried the misreading as his own title for the rest of his life. He found the Kularan system during the New Sith Wars, a 1,000-year conflict between the New Sith Empire and the Jedi-led Republic. He settled on a poisonous world in the system called Almas. The atmosphere was not breathable, and the soil was hostile, so Revan terraformed it. Using Sith alchemy and biological manipulation, he engineered a species of grass called callothin, seeded it across the surface, and rewrote the atmosphere through the grass until he could walk outside without a mask. Then, he built a fortress. Revan designed the fortress as a focal point for the dark side. He constructed a dome that channeled dark side energy. The floor of the lightsaber training chamber and his most valuable bookcases were lined with Mandalorian iron, resistant to the Force and to lightsaber blades. The walls held mechanical traps invisible to Force senses and to technology, and the dungeon cell severed a Force user's connection to the Force entirely. He wrote his autobiography in the Sith language directly into the inner walls. But the whole construction, the grass, the stone, the trap corridors, was scaffolding around a single obsession. The Darkstaff was hidden inside an asteroid in that same belt. Revan began trying to reach it. The staff communicated in its own way. It entered Revan's dreams, and the Sith Lord wrote down what the staff told him. His journals were recovered from the fortress by Jedi investigators centuries later. Some of those investigators worked for a body inside the Order that the Council itself did not know existed. They delivered the journals to the Jedi Council anyway. The Council took the warning seriously enough that the Order maintained a watch over the Almas fortress for the next 1,000 years. Revan described the Darkstaff as an emptiness, a slice of the universe where there was no light and no heat, but also no cold and no dark. Light, he wrote, moved around it without entering its grasp. The staff did not want the light. It wanted the Force. Revan wrote that the staff hungered for energy and destruction. It possessed the desire to end lives. Its immense hunger was what disturbed him the most, and it was the reason he both feared the staff and sought to destroy it. He would build a mechanism to destroy the staff instead. During those long years, Revan built an army. Using Sith alchemy and rituals he developed inside the fortress, he created a new kind of Sith soldier called a Battle Lord, force bonded to the commander they served. If a Battle Lord ever tried to harm Revan, the wound turned back on the soldier. He took an apprentice around the same time, a man named Darson, who would come close to attaining Dark Lord rank under the planned Sith name Darth Malice. The two trained together inside the fortress for years. Revan's alchemical experiments killed Darson before he could complete his rise, and rather than let the body be wasted, Revan bound his apprentice's spirit to the fortress as a guardian. The Jedi eventually located Almas and attacked the fortress directly. The terraformed grass burned across the surface as starfighters bombarded the trap corridors, and the outer fortress structures collapsed under the assault. The inner tower held. The Battle of Almas was the last scene of Revan's life, and he knew, going into it, that the artifact had to be destroyed at that moment. If he died first, the staff would certainly be able to find a new hand with which to continue hatching its plans. Revan got hold of the Darkstaff during the battle. He tried to use its power against the Jedi attacking his fortress. The staff drained him instead, exactly as he had written it would. The same emptiness that had refused the light pulled him into itself. The energy it pulled out of him opened a force storm, a hyperspace wormhole unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Revan lost control the instant it formed. The staff used him as its battery, tearing through his army on its way out. Every Battle Lord Revan had bonded to his command was consumed inside the storm, and the Sith Lord was thrown forward through time. Revan came out of the storm centuries later on a world called Ruusan during the final campaign of the same war he had been fighting. The new Sith Wars had raged for centuries after he vanished from Almas. The Army of Light, led by the Jedi Lord Hoth, was locked in a series of brutal battles against the Brotherhood of Darkness, a Sith confederation led by Lord Khan. Revan walked onto that battlefield without warning to the soldiers on either side. The Darkstaff had stripped him of his connection to the Force during the storm. He was simply there, on the field, unable to use the Force, and without any idea where he was. He was killed by a Force user of no particular note. Meanwhile, the crypt Revan had built for himself inside the Almas fortress stayed empty. Back on Almas, it looked as if he had fled the battle and been killed by his own apprentice Darson, but Darson had been dead for some time by then. The fortress outlasted Revan, the whole Killeran system did, almost forgotten by the wider galaxy, with the Darkstaff sitting inside an asteroid for nearly 1,000 years before anyone knowingly went looking for it. Around 31 BBY, shortly after the invasion of Naboo, a Force-sensitive criminal named Len Marcus went into the Killeran asteroid belt to find the Darkstaff. He did not go on his own initiative. Marcus was one of the chief lieutenants in the organization of a Killeran crime lord named Narama, acting as a representative of its smugglers, and Narama had sent him into the asteroid belt. Marcus had his own reasons for going. He had heard about the Darkstaff, he wanted it for himself, and the job Narama had given him was cover for the search. Marcus found the staff inside an asteroid designated I-9 and recovered it. With the artifact on board, he turned his ship towards open space and began the flight out of the system. On the way out, the ship passed the planet Almas. The fortress on Almas had been sitting empty for nearly 1,000 years. The Jedi who drove Revan from the planet had not destroyed the inner tower. Its defenses had gone dormant, with no one to maintain them. But the fortress remembered what it had been built for, and when Marcus's ship passed overhead with the staff on board, something inside the stone recognized what was there. The dome fired a bolt of force lightning at the Darkstaff. The bolt struck the staff. The collision between Revan's weapon and his defense created a time vortex, and the entire Killeran system vanished from the galaxy. It reappeared 10 years later during the Clone Wars. No one inside the system had experienced the passage of time. Marcus was still on his ship with the damaged staff, Narama's organization was still running the asteroid belt, and the planets were all where they had been. The galaxy had moved on 10 years without them. The staff had been damaged in the strike, and Marcus could not use it for years. Around the start of the Clone Wars, Marcus made a deal with a Shevan slaver named Celeste Mourn. Marcus gave Mourn the Darkstaff and access to the Almas fortress. In exchange, Mourn would use the rituals Revan had left behind in the fortress to extract Force essences from captured living beings and feed them to the staff so the staff could rebuild. They built an extraction pyramid on Mourn's ship, the enemy Asma, and began trapping Force essences inside it. But the staff had already drawn attention to something it had not planned for. A team of freelance agents called the Heroes of Killeran, who had been tracking darkside activity across the system, boarded the enemy Asma together with a Jedi named Odin Malch. The Darkstaff sensed them coming. It reached into the nearest body it could find, a slave of Celeste Mourn's named Alianda, and possessed her. Speaking through her mouth, the staff offered the boarders anything they wanted if they turned back, and promised to destroy them if they did not. The boarders refused. The Darkstaff withdrew from Alianda and abandoned the ship, but it left the crystal pyramid running so it could keep absorbing the Force essences trapped inside. The boarders destroyed the pyramid before the staff could finish repairing itself. Then, they went after the staff. The Darkstaff planned to consume a Jedi-crafted artifact called the Eye of the Sun, hidden inside a Chahala tree on the planet Killeran, and used the absorbed Jedi energy to destroy the entire star system. Marcus carried the staff to the tree, and the heroes of Killeran arrived before it could reach the eye. A Force user among them channeled the light side of the Force directly into the Darkstaff. Under the pressure of pure light, the Darkstaff came apart. On the other hand, the Muur Talisman had been waiting longer than the Darkstaff's entire existence. Thousands of years earlier, when the Sith Order itself was still being founded, a Jedi exile named Celeste Mourn was building an army out of living flesh. Thousands of years before Darth Revan was born, before even the Great Hyperspace War between the Old Sith Empire and the Republic, a group of renegade Jedi were exiled from the galaxy after losing a conflict called the 100-Year Darkness. They had practiced a forbidden form of darkside alchemy, twisting living flesh into war creatures. The Jedi Order defeated them at the Battle of Korbas and banished the survivors into the unknown regions. One of those exiles was a former Jedi Knight named Celeste Mourn. He and his fellow exiles had studied the dark side deeply enough to master it. They traveled across uncharted space, crashed on a world called Korriban, and encountered the red-skinned native species who call themselves the Sith. They enslaved the population, claimed the planet, and took the local name for their order. Moore, one of the founders, specialized in flesh. Using the same alchemy the exiles had been banished for practicing, Moore began engineering creatures from living stock. His most successful creation was a species he called the Rakghoul, a bipedal predator with hard and plated skin, clawed hands, a distended jaw, and no mind of its own beyond what a Force user commanding the creature chose to give it. Moore designed the Rakghoul as a disposable soldier. Moore planned to raise an army of Rakghouls and use that army to conquer the galaxy. But the flesh was only half of the weapon. A fellow exile, the alchemist Sorza Sin, built Moore the first of 3 objects she called the Great Amulets. The talisman was a small piece of dark Sith metal designed to hold part of Moor's essence after his body died, and to spread his Rakghoul transformation to anyone nearby who was not Force sensitive. The metal carried a plague. Anyone without a Force connection who came near it in a wielder's hands risked turning into a Rakghoul instantly, without requiring any injuries. At the same time, Moore had engineered a slower, virus-like form that could spread through a Rakghoul's bite or claw. Once the artifact had seeded a single infected host into a population, the contagion kept moving on its own. Moore made the plague to spread without him, and the talisman to outlive him. The whole design assumed his body would die before his work was finished. The death of his future host was built into the plan from the start. Any Force user who touched the amulet faced the same kind of intrusion, but where the Darkstaff fed ambitions its host could still resist, Mour's fragments spoke directly into decisions, and given enough time, replaced the wearer entirely. Stronger Force users were better vessels, and the old Sith Lord worked harder on them. The medallion also stopped the wearer from aging. It became one of the most hunted artifacts in Sith history. Nagasato, who would later lead the old Sith Empire against the Republic, spent years trying to locate it. Other Dark Lords tore at each other trying to claim it, and none of them found it. The artifact behaved almost as if the Force did not want it found. Centuries after Mour's death, the last Sith bearer was killed in a cave-in inside the Undercity of Taris. Taris was a planet-wide city world with a glittering surface and buried lower levels where the poor lived without sunlight. Mour's talisman fell with its dying owner into the Undercity and stayed there. For hundreds of years, it sat in the Taris lower levels, slowly seeding the Rakghoul plague into the outcast population that lived in those tunnels. The city did not notice. The lower levels became a quarantine zone where infected creatures prowl the dark. The plague spread generation after generation, and the surface government responded by building walls and shooting anything that came up. The wait ended in 3963 BBY when a Mandalorian scientist went looking for the talisman on purpose. His name was Pulsifer. He was a Mandalorian scientist dismissed by other Mandalorians as not a real warrior. He pitched the Taris excavation himself over Cassius Fett's skepticism and got approval to lead it. This was the early years of the Mandalorian Wars, the galactic-scale invasion of Republic space that would eventually draw Revan and Malak out of the Jedi Order. Pulsifer believed the Force was a myth and that what Jedi call Force abilities actually came from magical possessions. The Muur Talisman, in his theory, was the key to unlocking what the Jedi had been hiding. He took a survey team to Taris after the Mandalorians captured the planet and descended into the Undercity. They dug through the Rakghoul-infested tunnels. They reached the chamber where the artifact had been buried for hundreds of years, and they pulled it out of the ground. The necklace had spent centuries waiting for a Force user. Pulsifer was not one, but it latched onto him aboard the Maresi before the ship reached the staging world of Jebel. When one of Pulsifer's men tried to pry it off, Pulsifer touched the man's chest plate and left glowing red marks on the armor where his fingers had landed. The man died on the spot and later transformed into a Rakghoul. Having found Pulsifer unworthy, the talisman waited for someone stronger. Pulsifer had killed one of his own men to keep the artifact. Within hours of recognizing he was the wrong man, the artifact killed him in turn. The talisman had let him think he was claiming it, but in reality, the sentient artifact picked its own wearers and discarded the ones who didn't fit. On the other side of the galaxy, the same hidden body that had recovered Revan's journals had already seen what was coming. The group called itself the Jedi Covenant. Its members had their identities scrubbed from official records, answered to no council, and existed to identify Sith threats early and stop them before another great Sith war. Seers within the Jedi Covenant saw a vision of widespread destruction involving the Muur Talisman and 4 individuals. One was a fugitive Padawan named Zayne Carrick. The other 3, unknown to the Covenant, would later become Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, and Cade Skywalker. They decided to find the medallion first. One of their operatives was Celeste Mourn, a Covenant shadow whose job was locating darkside artifacts and containing them before anyone else found them. The Covenant sent her after the necklace and also ordered her to bring in Zayne Carrick, whom the Covenant had framed for the Padawan massacre of Taris. But by the time Mourn got close to the talisman, Pulsifer had already recovered it. Mourn followed Pulsifer's team out of the Undercity and stowed away on the Maresi for the trip to Jebel, the ice world the Mandalorians use as a staging ground. Zayne Carrick was also on board, along with his friend Marn Hieroglyph. None of the 3 knew the others were there. A Mandalorian army was assembled on Jebel, waiting to invade Alderaan. Pulsifer walked into the Mandalorian encampment at the Ice Citadel still wearing the necklace. The transformation field triggered. Thousands of Neo-Crusaders and recruits assembled for the Alderaan invasion began changing inside their armor, faster than any response could contain. Within hours, Jebel was a Rakghoul world. Carrick reached the communications dome and warned Cassius Fett that the plague could go galactic and that nothing could be allowed to land or leave. Fett was suspicious of a Jedi fugitive, but the warning was detailed enough to make him hesitate. Pulsifer captured Carrick and tried to interrogate him about the artifact's secrets, threatening to seal him inside an ancient Sith prison box Pulsifer had collected for his laboratory. The necklace sensed Carrick's Force sensitivity, detached from Pulsifer, and moved to attach to Carrick. The rock ghouls turned on Pulsifer and tore him apart. Mourn arrived and tried to pry the necklace off Krayt. When she called its attention to herself by saying she was a Jedi, it reattached to her neck instead. Mourn saw Carness Moor's spirit the instant the talisman fastened into her flesh. Moor told her he was the future, and that she belonged to him now. Within minutes, she was sending the rock ghouls out to kill more Mandalorians. The amulet let her revive the skills the soldiers had before they were infected and direct them as an organized army against Fett's forces on the surface. Krayt and Hieragrif watched her do it. Krayt had noticed the prison box in Pulsifer's lab, a sealed stasis chamber called Drapa's Oubliette. If he could seal Mourn inside with the artifact still attached, the artifact would be out of play without her having to die, and the Covenant researchers on Odrin might find a way to remove it later. Mourn, still lucid in flashes, agreed. She handed Krayt a key to the Covenant's secret artifact storehouse on Odrin and asked him to deliver her there. She also told him before the lid closed that she believed he had not killed the Padawans on Taurus. Krayt sealed the lid over her face, and the stasis field engaged. With the talisman's influence cut off, the rock ghouls outside lost their organization and turned on each other. Then, Cassius Fett made his own decision about Jebel. He had an infected world on his hands, and Krayt's warning had landed. He ordered a nuclear bombardment of the entire surface. The missiles fell, and the ice cracked. Everyone on the planet died inside the blast wave. The surface was sterilized down to bedrock, and the ice sheet melted into a steaming radioactive sea. Fett's fleet broke orbit and continued the war somewhere else. Krayt, who had gotten off the world with Hieragrif before the bombardment, assumed Mourn and the talisman had been destroyed in the attack. He could not return to retrieve her, so he kept moving. She stayed there for nearly 4,000 years. Around 1400 BBY, ice miners working the refrozen planet dug into the buried ruins and found the sealed box under the permafrost. They did not know what it was, but it looked old, it looked valuable, and a stasis device like that was worth money. One of them killed his companions to take it off-world by himself. The oubliette drifted through the galaxy for generations, changing hands through blood and through trade. Owners who tried to open it failed because the locking mechanism was Sith-built and keyed to a Sith Lord, and the smugglers who wound up with the box had neither the knowledge nor the raw force strength to break the seal. Among antique dealers, the object picked up a name, the Jebel box, and a legend that it contained a secret treasure of the Jedi Order. Prices rose with each sale, and blood was spilled over it more than once. While Mourn endured it in the box, the galaxy she had been pulled out of finished collapsing and rebuilding itself around her 3 times over. She knew only the dark, the talisman, and Moor's voice. In 19 BBY, the box was in the hands of a smuggling crew. They had picked it up from a battlefield where a species had fought a war for it years earlier. After a failed sale to a crime lord and a 3-way firefight, the crew sold the box to a scholar named Fane Patori, not knowing he was an agent of Darth Vader. Then, Vader came for it. Patori, who had already worked out most of what the box was, delivered the oubliette to Vader. An old hologram recorded by Marn Hieragrif referred to the object as Lord Drapa's oubliette, and Patori had concluded that it contained the Muur Talisman and a Jedi from 40 centuries past. He warned Vader, as the Dark Lord cut open the outer crate, not to open the box itself. Despite the warning, Vader opened it anyway. Mourn woke up expecting Zane Krayt. Patori told her what had happened, that the Mandalorian Wars were thousands of years in the past, that the Republic had fallen, and that the Sith now ruled the galaxy. She took a long moment to process what she had been told. Then, she drew her lightsaber and attacked Vader. The duel was short. Vader disarmed her within the first few exchanges, and when he moved in to finish her, Mourn reached for the talisman's power instead of her blade. The clone troopers standing around Vader transformed into rock ghouls in the space of a breath. The plague field swept outward faster than Vader could cut through it, and the Dark Lord of the Sith, caught between a woman he had just disarmed and a squad of his own men, now turned into Sith spawn, did the only thing left to do. He retreated. Empty-handed, Vader left the moon. Mourn was stranded there with no ship and no way off, and the desert spread out around her in every direction. She walked the same ridgelines for nearly 20 years. Moore talked to her the entire time, and she had nothing else around her but the desert and the rock ghouls Vader's troops had become. Now her servants, her own mind weathered alongside theirs. He decided to use her against the rebels. He leaked information through a captured rebel spy about a secret Imperial weapon hidden on a desolate moon in the Outer Rim. The Rebel Alliance took the bait. Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia Organa led the team that came to investigate. About 9 months after the Battle of Yavin, Mourn had spent nearly 20 years alone with Karness Moore, whispering in her ear, and she had gone insane over the decades. When Luke arrived on the moon, she attacked him, believed him a Jedi who would abandon her, and overpowered him quickly. Leia intervened before Mourn could kill him. In the scuffle, the talisman came off Mourn's neck and attached itself to Leia instead, and Moore, sensing a stronger Force user within reach, tried to possess her. Mourn pulled the talisman off Leia and reattached it to her own neck, locking Moore back inside her. A rebel trooper named Abel charged Mourn with blaster fire to save Leia, and Mourn transformed him into a rock ghoul before he could fire again. The distraction gave Luke and Leia an opening to escape. Mourn seized a rebel ship and left the moon with her rock ghouls. Then, another century passed. Mourn was traveling deep into space when her ship was pulled from hyperspace by a Pelion-class star destroyer called the Iron Sun. She assumed the ship belonged to the same empire that Vader had served. She transformed the entire crew of 8,000 into rock ghouls, seized the vessel, and took it into a fractured hyperlane in the deep core, where she intended to hold Muur forever. By this point, a new Sith regime called the One Sith had taken power under a Dark Lord named Darth Krayt. Krayt had taken Coruscant and was running the galaxy from it. He was also dying. Decades earlier, Krayt had been fitted with biological implants from the Yuuzhan Vong, an extragalactic species whose tissue grafting techniques had given him powers at a cost. The Vongbots were slowly consuming him from the inside, and no Sith alchemist in his own court could reverse the process. A young bounty hunter named Cade Skywalker, descended from Luke's line, had a personal interest in Krayt's death. Cade's ship was pulled from hyperspace by the Iron Sun, and he and his crew were brought aboard, where they were attacked by Mourn's rock ghouls. Cade and Azlyn Rae were both infected. When the plague began to transform them, Cade used a force healing technique called Dark Transfer to cleanse the virus from his own body and from Azlyn's. Mourn had never seen anyone cure the Rakghoul plague. She joined Cade's crew. She had a plan, or Muur had a plan working through her. Speaking through Mourn's voice, he sent a message to Darth Krayt on Coruscant, offering to heal what was killing him in exchange for Krayt's body as his new vessel. He also promised to deliver Cade Skywalker as a prisoner. Krayt was to come alone to a dark side world called Had Abaddon. Emperor Rowan Fel, the deposed ruler leading the Imperial faction in rebellion against Krayt, also learned of the talisman. Fel sent 3 of his Imperial Knights, Antares Draco, Gannard Krieg, and Azlyn Rae, to recover it. Fel planned to use Mour's power to raise a Rakghoul army against Krayt and reclaim his throne. The strike team on Had Abaddon assembled around Cade, Celeste Mourn, the Jedi Knight Shadow Val, and Fel's 3 Imperial Knights, with additional support from Cade's crew. They attacked Krayt's garrison on the planet to draw him into the trap. Believing he was being summoned to a meeting with Muur, Krayt walked in. Krayt was the most powerful Sith alive in his era, the one who had taken Coruscant and held it. He was also the Sith who could not heal what was killing him from inside, and the artifact had offered him exactly the thing his power could not deliver. The reigning Dark Lord of the Sith walked into a trap because Karness Moore had promised him survival. Krayt arrived at Had Abaddon with 4 Sith Lords. He took Maladi, Strife, and Talon down to the surface and left Warlock in orbit, expecting Muur to hold up his end of the bargain. Muur, speaking through Mourn, demonstrated his healing power on Krayt long enough for the strike team to spring the trap. The Rakghouls Mourn had already made of the Imperial garrison surged forward as Cade, Val, Draco, Krieg, and Rae emerged from the concealment. The fight scattered. Cade ended up against Talon. Draco broke from the others to grab the talisman for Fel and was forced pushed back by Mourn before he could reach her. Krayt himself fell on Mourn, abandoning his lightsaber and exchanging Force lightning with her, while Maladi joined the assault. In the chaos, Azlyn Rae found her opening and drove her lightsaber through Krayt's chest. Mourn, still locked in the lightning exchange, unleashed a dark side torrent that caught both Krayt and Rae. Rae went down burned and unconscious. Mourn force pushed the weakened Krayt off a cliff. Krayt's surviving Sith Lords carried his body away. Everyone on Cade's side believed he was dead. Even then, the pattern held. Sith tried to use it, Jedi tried to contain it, and neither side was ever able to keep it safe. Mourn had carried Karness Moore for 4,000 years. She had fulfilled her purpose for coming to Had Abaddon. Then she asked Cade to finish the rest of it. Karness Moore had spent 4,000 years inside her, slowly grinding through her resistance and waiting for her control to break. The moment had arrived. Mourn could feel him taking ground inside her mind, and she knew that within hours she would be gone, and he would be running her body. Every Force user who had touched the talisman before her had been consumed by Muur in exactly this way. Mourn was the first to see it coming, and refused it. She carried the talisman across both her periods of wakefulness, before and after the long sleep in the oubliette. Muur moved through her thoughts at a measured pace, visible to her but always one step ahead of any defense she could raise. Mourn had watched him work on her in detail, and by the end, she knew there was nothing in her that could stop him. She told Krayt Skywalker to kill her. Krayt argued with her, but Mourn explained that if he did not do it at that moment, Muur would take her over within hours, and Krayt would be fighting an immortal Rakghoul commanding Sith Lord, wearing the body of the woman who had just helped him bring down Krayt. With no other option left, Krayt ignited his lightsaber and ran it through her. In the time it took the plasma blade to cool, her body disintegrated into dust. The talisman, which had been fastened into her flesh for 4,000 years, dropped free of the disintegrating corpse, extended its metal claws as legs, and crawled up Krayt's arm towards his neck. Muur's voice started speaking into Krayt's thoughts. The pitch was the same one he had made to Mourn and to every Force user before her. Muur offered Krayt immortality, an army of Rakghouls at his command, and guidance from the mental remnant of one of the Sith Order's founders. Krayt could have everything he wanted, so long as he did not resist. Despite the offer, Krayt refused, and then he used an ability that almost nobody in the galaxy still had. Shatterpoint was a rare Force technique passed down through a small number of teachers over thousands of years, most famously practiced by the Jedi Master Mace Windu during the Clone Wars. A user could perceive the stress lines inside an object, a person, or a situation, and see where the structure would fail if the right amount of force was applied at the right spot. Krayt Skywalker, taught the technique by the Force ghost of his father Cole, had inherited the ability. He turned it on the talisman crawling up his arm. He saw the fault lines running through the metal and the bindings that held Muur's imprint inside the object. He poured Force energy into those fault points until the bindings cracked apart and the talisman broke. Muur's imprint, untethered from the metal that had been holding it together for thousands of years, came apart with the object. The Rakghoul plague itself continued to spread through the galaxy in its virus form, but Muur was done, and the box that had held Mourn had a builder. Drapa's oubliette, the stasis coffin Zane Carrick had sealed Mourn inside on Jebel, had been designed for one specific purpose. Remulus Drapa was a Baron and an Admiral, a Jedi who had fallen to the dark side during the 100-Year Darkness. He was exiled after the Battle of Corbus alongside Karness Moore and Sorz's Sin, and helped found the old Sith Empire on Korriban with the others. At some point during those early years, Drapa built the oubliette to imprison Muur and contain the hypnotic influence of the talisman. The stasis chamber was designed specifically against the Muur talisman's properties and could hold a wearer indefinitely. Drapa put it into the field. When Vader cut open the oubliette on the desert moon, Muur's first reaction, on being released, was to curse Drapa by name for building the prison. Through her connection to Muur, Mourn recognized that the oubliette had been built by Drapa for exactly this purpose, and willingly entered the device. Celeste Mourn's body was gone. The talisman was broken. Karness Moore, whose spirit had waited 4,000 years for a body strong enough to take over, was finally quiet. The pieces sat on the ground at Had Abaddon, and nothing came to collect them. The dark side rewarded the pursuit of power without limit. A Sith who refused to build a dangerous weapon because it might destroy other Sith would be choosing restraint over capability, and restraint was incompatible with the doctrine. The whole point of the Rule of Two and the Sith codes that came before it was that the strength gets proven by what you can wield, take, and dominate. A weapon too dangerous for your own side to control was never going to deter a Sith who believed the next wielder would prove strong enough. The Darkstaff and the Muur Talisman are only two things in a much larger catalog of darkside artifacts, monsters, and techniques in the Legends timeline. A broader compilation traces the origins of the Sith themselves, following the Order from its earliest founders through its oldest rituals, its cruelest empires, and the Dark Lords who shaped its long shadow across the galaxy. Another deeper descent maps the horror tier of the Legends continuity, cataloging 50 of its most dangerous concepts, from planet-eating Sith Lords to soul-fueled empires, from undead fleets to reality warp and chaos.